In stats, we did notes for 1.0 and 1.1. So we started by just kind of skimming through this. There's the basic definition of stats and data analysis. Individuals, those are objects or living beings. Doesn't have to be living to be studied. It could be some kind of object like color of car or something like that. Variables, those are like how many questions you're asking. And your type of variable can either be categorical, or another word for that is qualitative. Or it could be quantitative, which another word for that is numerical. Now, if it's numerical, it could be discrete. Oops. Or continuous. All right. So the distribution, that's where it gives you a picture of what you're looking at, a picture of the variable. So typically you're going to ask questions like, where's the typical value? The center. Where is the, or what is the shape? We'll go over this in a lot of detail later. And what is the spread? And that's how you define a distribution. Inference, that's where we draw conclusions from our sample. So ideally, we take a good random sample and we make inference to the population we took the sample from. So moving on, we looked at some data. So these are Canadian students randomly selected, and a bunch of questions were asked about them. Looks like 7 questions. So for the individuals in the set, let's make this a little bigger. Can't quite get it all. I think we can go off of what is typed right above the table. 10 Canadian students who completed the survey. What was this website? Censusatschool.com. The variables that were measured, well, we need to identify as categorical or quantitative. So let's do it this way. There's a few ways you can do it. I'm going to do it this way. Looks like province is categorical because they're responding with a descriptive word. There's no value attached to what they're saying. Gender, categorical. Number of languages spoken, so that becomes quantitative. Handedness is categorical. Height is quantitative. Whoops, struggling with spelling there. There we go. Wrist circumference is also quantitative. And lastly, preferred communication is categorical. I hope that makes sense. The eighth individual, you just got to be really clear. So I'm going to scroll up so I have room to write and still see number 8. The eighth individual is a student from the province of Ontario, male, speaks 4 languages, is left-handed, is 157.5 centimeters tall, has a 147 millimeter wrist circumference, and prefers text messages for communication. Pretty simple. You're just copying, but you're also using context, like what are those numbers? What do those words mean? So you do need to put it into a sentence. And that was it for 1.0, I believe. Let's go forward. In class, we're going to talk about this. We did this on Monday, filled out this data sheet. We'll talk about that later. But we moved on to 1.1 and categorical data. So here we are with this problem about radio stations, and they break it down by genre. So first of all, this is categorical data because we have all these different responses, all these genre responses that people had. Some people preferred country music, some people preferred rock music, and so on. Now, you do need to be able to read this chart correctly. So frequency is another word for count. So there were 1,556 people. Who are we talking about here? It's just the distribution of, so these aren't people's preferences, sorry. This is the distribution of type of station in the U.S. Sorry, I said that wrong. So there are 1,556 adult contemporary radio stations out there in the U.S. at the time of this survey. But out of all 13,838 stations, that's 11.2%. So I hope you're okay with that, calculating that. It's a very basic calculation. We would go 1,556 divided by 13. I think it was 838. Let's look. Yeah. And when you do that, you get 0.112. I actually took mine to the 4th place value when I did it. I recommend 4 place values. So maybe try and do the rest of these. You're going to go 1196 divided by 13,838, 569 divided by that total. And what I created on the right, the far, far right of our picture, is relative frequency. That's before you move the decimal. If they don't ask for percent, I usually leave it as relative frequency. If they ask for percent, then just move the decimal. All right? Let's see, I think I saved all my work. See if it remembers. Yay, it did. So you should get all of those numbers for your response. So double check that you're A-okay with that. and we're going to move on. One thing I will say is if all you have is one group sorted into categories like we have right here, you are welcome to just leave it as frequency over here. These are A-OK. But the moment I compare, I have to have relative frequencies. We talk about this again later. So so this is the U.S. broken down by radio stations. If I'm comparing radio stations to, say, France or, I don't know, some other country, then we need to make sure we go by relative frequency. All right? The reason is because that grand total is probably different. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all good with that. Here's a little bit down here. They may not add exactly up to 1.0, but that's because of round-off error. It should be very, very close. And then next in class, we shared all of our responses. So this was first period, and we'll talk about that later. All right, that was it on Tuesday. See y'all later. Bye.